So you got to press it a little bit.
Okay.
Wayne, I thought Wayne was going to be here.
To see
Uh-huh.
the guy from
First, yeah.
He's a little late. I don't know.
But Paul's here. I mean, Paul can do it, but I thought Wayne was going to be here too. Did you say Wayne was not going to be here or he would be here? They're not coming. Okay. Okay, so Paul. Okay, perfect. So we're ready when you are. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Regional Mobility Authority Board to order on November 8th at 9 o'clock. Mr. Tejas, do we have any public comment? Okay, we'll go to item number 2, adoption of the minutes for the meeting, our last meeting, October 11th, 2017. That was distributed to all the members. Any questions or comments on those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item 2 has been approved. Item number 3, consider and approve a resolution authorizing the redemption and defeasance of approximately $1.165 million of Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority pass-through toll transportation revenue bonds for the 601 Series 2008. And I believe I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Gates.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. So today, as read into the record, we have an item that relates to the State Spur 601 bond issuance. Unfortunately, our financial advisors had a conflict and aren't able to present this item today. However, we have Paul Braden, who serves as our bond counsel. He's going to walk us through this PowerPoint and through the recommended board action. So with that, Mr. Braden.
Good morning. For the record, Paul Braden with Norm Rose Fulbright, Bond Counsel to the RMA. Before I get into the presentation, maybe for the benefit of the public and for some people on the board who maybe weren't here the last time we did this, let me give a little context of what we're doing. As you all probably recall, these Series 2008 bonds are sometimes referred to as pass-through revenue bonds or shadow toll bonds, where the payments for those bonds are actually made by TxDOT. So there's a contract between TxDOT and the RMA whereby a certain amount of money is paid to the RMA for this road, depending on how much traffic goes across it. And this contract has minimums and maximum payments. When we issued the bond deal back in 2008, we structured this deal so debt service would be paid on the basis of the minimum payments under the contract. So the expectation was that we'll structure the deal in essence at the worst scenario, worst case possible, that if the minimum payments are made, that's enough money to pay the debt service on this bond deal and pay it through maturity. But what we also did is we realized that their traffic flow might be better and there might be more money coming in than what took place back at the minimum level. So there were a couple maturities that we set up that had early calls. And what the idea was that these bonds could be called fairly early in the maturity process. And as these payments came in, you could pay those bonds off sooner, thus reducing your overall debt service and saving money for the RMA. And we've done that periodically. The RMA and this board has done that periodically the last 2 years and been quite successful at it, where we're down to, we had 2 rather large maturities that had these early calls in them, and this defeasance, if approved, will pay off that last portion of the early call maturities with this defeasance. So with that said, I'll go ahead and move forward. And this just says the Series 2008 redemption. So this was the original debt service on the bonds. And you can see that the total debt service and interest paid. And there were 2 bonds callable starting February 15, 2018, and a bond call starting February 15, 2011. So we've been paying off the 2011 callable bonds. So 41.795 million of the Series 2008 bonds have already been redeemed, again, by the early call dates. So the 2022 maturity, that's the first maturity that we started calling on, was fully redeemed, and now this will pay off the 2021 maturity, which is the last one that had the early call date. And this just shows the payments that have been made. Again, the currently extended debt service after accounting for prior redemptions. And so this is the proposed redemption. So this, again, Series 2008, the maturity is the 2021 maturity. It's the 5% coupon, and the refunded par is 1.165 million. That's the entire remaining amount of that maturity. Let me go to the next thing. The call date would be December 15th. We've already talked to the trustee and given them notice that if the board takes action on this, to be in a position to call the bonds on that date, and they're in that position. So right after this meeting, we'll give them a copy of the signed resolution and a letter from Raymond as executive director instructing them to go ahead and call these bonds. What's available in the redemption account? So one of the accounts under the trust is a redemption account where these sort of prepayments are set aside for this type of thing. Is $1.67 million. And so what you need to pay off these bonds is less than the $1.676 million that's in there now. So you need $1.184 million to pay off the bonds, which is the par amount of the bonds and the interest accrued through the call date. There's about $4,000 of fees that cover both the trustee fees and our fee in terms of doing the paperwork and getting the bonds called. So after those payments will be done, you'll still have $488,000 left in the redemption account sitting in the trustee, which can be used for future redemptions when the other bonds start to be callable. And this is the remaining debt service after the proposed redemption. Again, reducing your debt service. And that's all I have. If anybody has any questions. But the recommendation would have a motion to approve the resolution.
Do we have some leftover money from the last time we did this? Did we, that rolled into this?
So what would happen,
Little
anytime
bit.
you do this, you take as much money as needed, and anything left over sits in the redemption
sits there.
account. And what typically does is the trustee and the FA get together and they figure out how much money you need for the debt service payments in the next cycle before the tech stop payments come in. Make sure there's adequate money to cover those payments, and then everything else you redeem to the round up to the right down to the $5,000 increments. So you redeem as much as possible.
Okay, all right. Mr.
I have
Weaver,
some
you had a
questions.
Questions?
Who's the bondholder?
It's widely held. It was
All
publicly
right,
offered.
so it's public, it's not the state or it's...
Right. No, it's
okay.
publicly offered.
At 5% seems expensive bond money these days. Is that right? The last time we did an issue, we were at 3 point something.
Right, so that's the coupon. That's not necessarily the tick, because when you sell bonds, the coupon, you might get a premium on your bonds, so your true
I
interest costs
see.
might be less.
Okay.
But that is higher than a prevailing rate would be right now.
Is it practical to redo the bond?
So the RMA has been giving proposals over the years about refunding these bonds because of the coupons that they have. But the mechanism that you had in place, the way you can pay these off early with money, has been the most efficient way to pay down the debt. And so when these proposals have come forward so far, the FA has taken a look at them, and then he's compared them to the mechanism you have in place. When we set up the deal, and it was more cost effective to leave that mechanism in place because it would go away if you did a refunding. They wouldn't give you that short call date, or you'd have to pay a lot for it. So now that these are all gone, the bonds are now currently callable, the remaining bonds, I think February 15, 2018. And so I think Wayne and Emily probably will take a look to see if it makes sense to do a refunding on the remaining bonds.
Okay. One last question. We've got a couple of bankers on the board, so they explained defeasance. What is feasance?
I don't think there's such a word.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Any other
I
yeah,
have a related
Mr. Wardy?
question, not directly on this, to Mr. Tejas. Raymond, is Spur 601, is the traffic count what we anticipated? Has it grown exponentially or under or over?
It's under, actually.
Really?
It's under the original projections, yes, sir.
I challenge you to drive it at 4 o'clock some afternoon.
Right, right. It has its peaks, definitely. But overall, the numbers are less than what was originally anticipated.
Significantly less or just off a little?
The last time we submitted an invoice through, and so remember the mechanism that this pass-through toll structure is set up with is 25 cents for a vehicle under 20 feet, and I want to say it's 85 cents for a vehicle over 20 feet. Through the calculation of all the vehicles that ride through there, we're currently generating $14 million in actual revenues. However, as Mr. Braden mentioned, the minimums and maximums, the minimum that we receive is $15.6 million. So we're still well under $1 million of the original anticipated revenues that we would generate from the vehicle passage, our vehicle counts.
Okay.
So it is significantly lower than we had originally thought.
Well, I think with the pending reconstruction of Interstate 10, the traffic counts will increase significantly on Spur 601.
Yes.
That was just my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Brady? I entertain a motion to approve item number 3.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item number 3 is approved. Item number 4, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute work authorization number 3 to a contract for engineering services with Dannenbaugh Engineering Corp. for the State Loop 375 Main Lanes Widening Project. Mr. Tess.
Thank you. So this item, I've got a very brief PowerPoint. You may remember this, actually. This is virtually the exact same PowerPoint that I presented when I came to you for excuse me, the frontage road ramps project, but they're linked, so I thought that I would bring it back and refresh your memory. So what we're talking about today then, as read into the record, is specifically the work authorization number 3 for engineering services with Dannenbaugh. This relates specifically to the main lanes widening project. So to give you some background though, TxDOT several years back originally provided funding to the Regional Mobility Authority so that we could develop preliminary engineering and environmental services for what was then called the Americas Managed Lanes project. And that was really the extension of the Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes through the widening of I-10. So basically dropping new lanes into the center of Loop 375 from roughly Zaragoza Port of Entry up to I-10. That was the original project. Then from there, TxDOT then added some additional funds to our project to actually expand that through not just the main lanes widening, but then added some frontage roads and some braided ramps and some other improvements outside of Loop 375, but to serve the same section of roadway. So that was added by TxDOT later. So when I speak generally about the Americas Managed Lanes project and the preliminary engineering and the environmental, we're talking about both of those components now, and we're developing that work for TxDOT now. However, TxDOT has also asked us to begin developing the design documents. So those are the commonly referred to as PS&E documents for both components. So the main lanes, which is the widening project, and the frontage roads and braided ramps, which is now known as the frontage road project. So now we've broken that into the 2 projects. And this is intended to show you what they look like. So the main lanes widening are the green lines, again, really just adding lanes to the center. And then everything else, the frontage road project, are the braided ramps and everything associated with that, including the new bridge over the UP railroad line, All of that activity is under the frontage road ramp project. So 2 projects being developed, both of them being developed by us. This is how the RMA is pursuing each of these individual projects. So the managed lanes, preliminary engineering and environmental, which again incorporates both of them, the engineering and environmental components. We have an agreement with Brown and Gay Engineers, and that agreement is for $1.9 million, and that is underway now. The State Loop 375, the frontage road ramps design services, I came to you in September, and you all authorized the execution of that agreement. And again, that's the PS&E, the design documents for that, for those services, and that is $2.3 million. And then today I have before you the main lanes widening design services. So again, the PS&E, but just the green component, the main lanes, the widening to the center. And the proposed agreement before you today as item number 4 is for $3.5 million. So hopefully that helps. That's all I have for you. And subject to your questions, though, I would recommend approval.
Question, Madam Chair?
Mr. Warding?
Mr. Tejas, what is the proposed cost of the total project? Did we do some cost estimates on that?
So that's part of this program. Do we have some general numbers on these?
David Head with Atkins GEC, and he put me on the spot a little bit, but I believe they were somewhere around 49 million for one of them and somewhere in that vicinity for the other one. And that's round numbers.
That's good enough today. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Those are very round numbers, right? So part of these 2 PS&E agreements will actually be to develop those numbers in a little more detail.
Any other questions for Mr. Tejas or Mr. Head? Okay. Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item number 4 has been approved. Item number 5. Mr. Tejas, can we do this all together?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. So, item number 5, quarterly update on the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan and discussion and action on board resolutions authorizing change orders to the following construction contracts. A, East Lake Boulevard Phase 2 project, change order number 6 with Jordan Foster Construction for additional transformers for illumination. B, East Lake Boulevard Phase 2 project, change order number 7 with Jordan Foster Construction for the removal of certain trees in conflict with project work. C, Rojas Drive Improvements Project, change order number 3 with Horizon Construction for resolution of a utility conflict. D, Old Waco Tanks Road Project, change order number 7 with International Eagle Enterprises for resolution of conflicts with illumination poles. And E, Old Waco Tanks Road Project, change order number 10 with International Eagle Enterprises for additional traffic control requested by the county. Mr. Tejas.
Thank you. So this item, actually, we have 2 PowerPoints for you. The first is the regular quarterly update, and Mr. David Head will come back to the podium and present that quarterly update. Then right after the quarterly update, we actually have a separate PowerPoint, as we've been using with you all for change orders to keep those clearly defined for you. So, Mr. Head, I'll ask you to present the quarterly update.
Good morning, David Head with Atkins GEC for RMA, and this is your quarterly update on the Comprehensive Mobility Plan. We've gone through this several times, so a lot of these slides will be a little redundant, but we'll see if we can get through them. So the agenda will be that we'll look at that project map again, and we'll go through the project listing of all the projects, and then we'll give the updates, and they're broken out into design, construction, and then the others funded by the RMA. So here's the map again, and I think most of you are very familiar with it now, but all the projects are on the east side, as you can see. So we'll go through those. So the projects in design, we've got the East Lake 1, should be coming out pretty soon. Darrington Road, Mission Ridge 2, and Pelicano. Those 4 projects are moving fairly swiftly along. They should be Well, they are on schedule, so we should be getting those out. The project's under construction. You've got the National Historic Trail, the Vista del Sol Drive, Old Waco Tanks, East Lake 2, the Rojas Drive, and the Mission Ridge, which we finished. So we're not going to be talking about that. And then Greg Edgemere is the other one that is funded by the RMA, and the developer is doing that work. So in design, we've got the East Lake 1. That one, we are trying to get it out of design, and right now some of the issue is that we've got some right-of-way that the county is acquiring, and I understand that will be going to the Commissioners Court on the 20th to get that done. But as you can see on the map, the red arrow there is it's bounded by I-10, and then the other project, which is East Lake 2, that's under construction right now. So with that, you can see the metrics of what we've spent so far, and where we've been and where we're going with the invoicing and things. We've done 2 amendments on this. So as I was saying, the plans are at 99% complete. We're ready to advertise this project. We're just waiting on a couple of things. The letting schedule, I'm anticipating to be very early 2018 at this point. We will probably, hopefully, advertise this next month. The probable cost is around 26, I'm sorry, let me back up. This is East Lake Phase 1. So, yes, it will be, we're hoping to advertise that. The probable cost will be around $26 million, and the funding is the VRF 2 bond proceeds, so it was the second time it went for the bond proceeds, the vehicle registration fees. So let me also talk a little bit about what we're lacking. We need an approval from the PD MUD for the storm sewer work, and then of course we've got some right-of-way that's got to be done by it's got to be acquired by the county, and then there's just a couple of construction easements we've got to get also, or the county is getting those also. So as I'd said, the right-of-way should be done around the 20th, and we're anticipating getting something from the MUD here pretty quick for the approval to move forward with their, they've got some drainage and some landscaping in the area that they're going to be on the hook for. So the Darrington Road project is the next project. As you can see, it hooks, if you've been out there, it's a 2-lane road. It's very busy. It connects Pelicano to East Lake Boulevard, and there is not another connection right there at this point with Mission Ridge. It basically stops. And so Darrington Road is being designed, and it will be finished up here fairly shortly, but the county wants to move forward with Mission Ridge Boulevard 2, which is that purple in there, to connect that before they start tearing up Darrington because of the traffic in the area, just as an aside. So on the Darrington Road, it's going to be 4 lanes divided. You can see the contract amount and what we spent to date. We're at basically 95% on the plans and specs, and the construction estimate is around 9.9, and that one is going to be shelved by the county until we can get the Mission Ridge Boulevard 2 built, and then we'll come back with the Darrington Road project. So we anticipate to let it in 2018. The Mission Ridge Boulevard project is not very long, so it shouldn't take very long to do it, but they want to get that one built before we go to the Darrington Road and start construction. The next project in design is the Pelicano. We just started this project. It's a fairly sizable project. It's from 375 over to Darrington Road. And if you've ever been on that road, there's a lot of trucks and things on that road. CEA is the engineer that's doing the design for it. You can see the contract amount. It's with the vehicle registration fees, second bond proceeds. They're doing everything from schematic through the PS&E, so environmental and the PS&E, the plan specs for it. They just started on this. We've got a very aggressive schedule for it because it needs to be let around August 2018, and the probable cost is around $17 million. And it is a 6-lane divided roadway. It's got the bike lanes, hike and bike. We have a little bit of right-of-way acquisition we have to do also on this. So let's go to the construction projects. This one is the National Historic Trail. As you'll remember, it has 126 signs. It was awarded back in March of 2017. Lesna Construction is the contractor. You can see the bid amount. We held a pre-construction back in July. And the contract time we anticipate to be 3 months. One of the issues that we have right now is that because of all the hurricanes and other natural disasters that everybody's been experiencing, a lot of the sign manufacturers are very busy at this point, and so the contractor has had to go back and find another sign supplier for these signs. So we've gotten that. They've just done their submittal. We're looking through it, and we're thinking we're going to get started in the next week or two with those signs being fabricated. So we have a few questions for them. Once we get those answered, we should be able to start fabbing the signs and move forward with this project. So you'll start seeing some of that work move forward.
Mr. Head, when is the sort of, after we get the signs, that sort of glitch fixed, when is the completion time? When are we estimating the completion time?
I am going to speculate that they're going to need some time to fab the signs, so that's probably around a month or two. They want to go in, their schedule shows that they want to go in and start doing their foundations, getting everything ahead of time, and then they'll come back with the poles and the signs, because they're fairly small signs, they're not real large signs, and so they'll just have a couple crews going through, moving through with everything at once. So foundations go out in front. Once those are cured out, then they'll come back with their signs, get that done. So to answer your question, they have 3 months to get all this done. And I anticipate that they'll get their first shipment of signs probably in about a month or so. It depends on how busy that fabricator is. But
So by first quarter 2018, should all be done?
it should be, yes, ma'am. We don't anticipate this project to take very long. And contractor, he's been ready to go. It's just that it's one thing after another with this one. So, but we should start seeing that fairly quickly move
Okay.
forward.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Mhm, thank you.
The next project is the Vista del Sol Drive project. It's that red arrow up there. It's a 2-lane road. It's got a lot of trucks that go down it. It's going to be, we're building it to a 4-lane divided roadway. It'll have a median down the middle of it. It goes from 375 to Charrington, which is just a road on the back side of it. Bain Construction is the contractor. We just started this project, so you can see we're at 4% complete. We started on October 11th. They're working on drainage ponds and detours and such. And so what I wanted to show you in this picture, this is from Charrington looking back towards 375. And up on the horizon, you can see all of that that's been scraped down. That's the developers coming in to start building the housing residential units over there. And so we have the water utility as part of this contract, and so they're needing their lines in. So there's a lot of development going on out here, and this road is going to be sorely needed here pretty quick, so we've got to get it done. This is just a look at one of the drainage ponds. We're excavating to get the embankment for the rest of the road and build that one of the drainage facilities there. And this is at Windermere. It's the detour. It was just a dirt road. It goes, we're looking from not quite 375, but where the paved surfaces are on one of the other parts of Windermere. And it goes back towards the east there. And back in there's several trucking outfits and I believe a concrete ready mix plant. And those trucks, we've got to give them a way out because we're about to shut down all of Vista del Sol on that lower end from Charrington up to a point, because the water lines have to go in. They go right down the middle of the road. They're about 20 feet in the ground, so we're going to take that whole road out. So this is a temporary detour for people to, or for the trucks to get around, so we're not taking them into the neighborhoods. The next project is the Old Waco Tanks Road project, and it's south of the freeway there. I think you're familiar with it, down to North Loop. But on this one, it's 4-lane divided. International Eagle is the contractor. You can see what's been spent to date and the contract amount. It's 86% complete to date, and they're still working on median, sidewalks, the drainage pond, and illumination. But it's shaping up. It's looking like a real road at this point. These are the approved change orders that have come through the board. We're at 61,000 and change. So this is looking towards I-10 on the road, and this is some of the colored median that's going in there. This is they're working on the interchange right there at the frontage road right now, and this is just a shot of that riprap. It's going in the middle. And then look, if you turned around at that point, look down the road, you can see that they're getting sidewalks and the illumination is coming on, and the medians are starting to be landscaped and those things, or prepared for landscaping. This is another look at it. Down there on the right side, you can see all those barrels down there. That's one of the change orders we'll be talking about. That's for the corn maze. The county requested us to put that in so that the customers to the corn maze could get in there. He really didn't have any other ingress or egress except to come through the project. So that was put in. I believe it's now taken out because Halloween's over, of course, and I think the corn maze is shut down.
Can you expand on this just a moment? The corn maze, this is just a temporary entrance at very low cost, or what is this done? The corn maze is
Corn maze is, that's what
Can
it is, the corn
I-
maze on the side.
If I could interject, we actually have a separate PowerPoint for the change orders, so if you're okay with it, could we wait
Okay.
until we get to the change
All right, I
orders?
saw that and I was curious.
Yes, sir. All right, thank you.
Private.
But all the kids go over there and get lost in the corn maze,
Okay.
and this was the only way into it. It's one of the farms out there, I believe. This is just another look at that detour where we had ingress and egress through North Loop and up to it. This is down at North Loop. This is some of the sidewalk work. We've about completed that intersection. We're just doing some of the sidewalks and the rock wall and those things down on that area to get that all cleaned up, but we're moving along with it. So let's move on to East.
Mr. Smith.
When you, David, when I went on that tour with you down there, the surface of the concrete roadway appeared to be far from complete. Has there been any progress on completion plans to smooth that out at all?
The contractor had scheduled I believe it's a ride quality device. I think it's the maze meter, but I'm not sure what they call it at this point. But anyway, it's a device that measures the surface roughness of the road, and by spec, he's got to meet a certain smoothness spec for that road. And what I understand is he had scheduled that, but then for whatever reason, it was not. It was canceled, and it has not yet come in to do the surface test. So we'll have to do a surface test, and then we'll decide, or we'll find out which sections don't meet the specification for the roughness, and then he'll have to come back and give us a proposal for how he fixes that. Usually it's through grinding the surface to fix those areas, and that's not uncommon with really any of your roads. If you look down I-10, you can see these places where they've been ground and things like that. So it happens, but he still has to do that, yes, sir. And he'll do that before he stripes and all that, because it will mar the surface, and then he'll have to come back and put the grooves on it and reseal it and those things.
At his expense, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And that's scheduled, that isn't scheduled yet, or it's scheduled for when?
It's not scheduled at this point. He had it scheduled, and then the contractor, from what I understand, the contractor canceled it, and so we haven't heard when that will take place.
Thank you.
He still has to do, I think he has to, the way I would see it, in my opinion, is he's got to get everything ready all the way up through the whole project, and then usually the contractor likes to sweep everything, because a rock or anything will throw off that meter, and so they'll get everything ready to go, get it all nice and swept, and then he'll have that company come in and ride each lane, and then he'll have a printout of what those issues will be, or what that smoothness is. It's an index is what they call it, and he's got to be within certain certain envelope of that index. So
I'd be curious to observe that when it happens, because I've never seen that process, and it's going to be pretty extensive for that road, I think.
yes, sir.
If you could let me know that, Mr. Tejas.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay, let's, if we would, let's move on to East Lake Phase 2. This is right there from Darrington Road. It's pretty much in Horizon City, and goes down to Horizon Boulevard there at that red arrow. So this is another one where we're widening 6 lanes divided. Jordan Foster's the contractor. You can see the contract's amounts. And we're at 73% complete. He's anticipating to be out of there early 2018. And we're working on embankment, excavation, hot mix. We've got a couple of sections we've got to build on the existing section, so he's working on those pretty good. But things are moving along fairly swiftly out there. The approved change orders, we're at 130.7 on those, and these are what has been approved to date. So this is looking from the start of the project on Darrington, and we have the 2 finished sections, and you'll notice the striped out median right there, and what that is for is it's eventually will be a 6-lane roadway, but East Lake Phase 1 will butt up to this, and they're at 4 lanes, and so this is to accommodate the traffic control from East Lake, the Phase 1 project, into this project. So we've striped that out, and I believe the East Lake Phase 1 will come in and redo that portion of, or take that stripe or those medians out. But that's where we're at on the very upper end. Other way. This is where they're working right now. This is Phase 3B, and you can see that they're working on subgrade and putting in inlets and those things. This is a short section. And they've got one more section to get to where what I call the desert, where there was a green field where they just went straight across. There was no road there. So got 2 little short sections to finish this up, and then we should have most of the roadway in. This is out in the Phase 5 section, which is the part across the green field, the desert, and they're working on the irrigation system for the landscaping. They're putting in their illumination, and they've been doing some hot mix and things like that. The left side of the road, they're kind of leaving that off right now because they're running all their trucks up it, so they don't want to put the final lift of hot mix on that until they get all their trucks in and out of there. That's why you see that one side is nice looking, smooth, the other side has a little bit to go. This is at the end of the project at Horizon in East Lake, and it's pretty much finished except for we need to come in with the signals, and we don't want to do, we're holding off on that work until the end of the project because we'll end up with the traffic control splitting out there on Horizon. We don't want the barrels all out sitting out there, so we're going to wait till they catch up with everything else, and they'll go in there and finish up the Horizon part so that we don't have the traffic control sitting out there. We felt it would be a little safer that way. So. This is Rojas Drive, and it's right there in the red arrow. And it's a widened to 6 lanes. Horizon Construction is the contractor. We're at 32% complete. We're working on phase 1B and 2B. They're doing concrete paving, intersections, and storm sewer work. And with this one, we've had a lot of utility conflicts that have been identified. Everywhere we seem to walk, there's a utility that's crossing somehow, and it's been in conflict. So we're working with the contractor. We've moved him around quite a bit. He's getting, however, down to where he's down to his last little sections to work in, and then hopefully we can get some of these utilities mitigated by then, and he'll have some other places to work, but we're having to move him around right now. So with that, we have 2 change orders that were approved for $79,000 and change. And this is a look from East Lake down the project towards the west. You can see that we've put in some of the illumination. We've got a lot of the main lanes on both sides in, and it's on one end it looks pretty good. Then as you move down, the reason I have this picture in here is on the left side of the slide in that dirt area outside the roadway, we have Time Warner Cable that's in that area. They've kind of held us up for, I would say, around approximately 3 months or so. And with that, we're waiting for them to move a cable. It's a fiber optic cable out of there. They want to put it overhead. We've been working with the county. The county knew about this, and they've been working with Time Warner Cable to come up with the cost to move that. We've affected that cost. And so Time Warner is supposed to go in there fairly soon. They've ordered the fiber optic cable to do that work. Now they're waiting on the cable, and they have a subcontractor going in there to do that work to move that out of the way so we can get this, because we've got 2 lanes. We need the 3rd lane in there. So. This is just another picture right there where we stub out for the 3 lanes, and we're waiting on Time Warner Cable. This is right there at Equestrian, so we've got the intersection pretty much done. We're just waiting to get that piece of it out of the way. Then this is at Chapel Hill, and there's a storm sewer, or it's a drainage pipe that's in the way right there at Chapel Hill that is the PD muds, I believe, and it's too high. We've got to go in there and mitigate that. We've been working with the mud to decide how to fix that, and but he stopped at this point there too, so he's had to skip over that also, he being the contractor. And this is at Equestrian. We have an AT&T and electric AT&T line and electric line that need to be lowered, so we've been working with both of those utilities to see what needs to happen in that area, and hopefully we'll get that one mitigated fairly soon also. This is at the end of the project, down by Bill Burnett. He really only lacks the left side of the screen, bringing down some concrete paving from there, and this all gets transitioned into Bill Burnett right there, or the end of the project. So he's got a little bit to go, and then we've got to find some other areas for him to work in. So we're working hard to get that mitigated. So the last project is the Greg Edgemere extension, and this is it's up there at the top of your screen. This is a developer project where the county has asked us to fund this through the RMA via payment to the county for the developer to do the work. It's a participation agreement, and it's the 4-lane divided bike lanes, or 4 lanes divided with bike lanes. It's at Edgemere. It connects Edgemere to Gregg, and it's across the desert right now, but it needs to be finished up there. So that they're just doing the curb and gutter and doing some grading and things like that, but we don't have just a lot of participation in this one.
Can you explain how this works?
Sure. So the way that this one is unique, the way that this one works is that the County of El Paso has a county developer agreement with this particular developer, whereby the developer actually constructs, plans, designs, and constructs the roadway, and then the county pays for those activities. However, what makes it unique is that the Regional Mobility Authority, using the vehicle registration fees of the county, actually provides those proceeds to the county, and the county makes the payments to the developer. So whereas normally the RMA is usually developing the designs, handling the procurement and the construction activities, all of those are on the county side, but the RMA continues to fund that program. That's how this one works.
So you know why I looked over at him. With that, I'll take any questions on the update.
Madam Chair, I have
Mr. Smith?
a question. I was amazed at the tour that you and Raymond gave me out there at the massive amount of development going on in the area, to include all the different subdivisions, the commercial, and all of that. I realize we just manage these projects for others, but what concerns me is the big picture of all of this, how it all fits together with traffic flow, with the amount of, with all that development going on out in the east, what that does to traffic on I-10 going back and forth and between and over and around. I'm not too sure I've got a handle on who's responsible for integrating all of these plans together to make sure that we look out to the future properly. I think the answer may be the MPO, but if that is the answer, it scares me just a little bit.
So I can address that very generally. Yes, the Metropolitan Planning Organization is in fact the entity that handles the master planning for the region, so they are responsible for that. However, I will say that the county has taken a very active role, more so than in any prior time that I'm aware of, in really planning out their system. They've actually talked to us about developing a master thoroughfare plan, which would be the first one the county has ever done, which really does exactly what you're talking about. It looks at its existing roadways, it looks at what should come in the future, and really prioritizes for them the projects that they want to develop into the future. That would then plug into the MPO's ongoing planning efforts. So I think the county has really taken a major step forward in terms of being more proactive towards how these roadways get developed. The first step clearly was this comprehensive mobility plan. The next step is a logical one, and I'm glad they're doing it, which is this new discussion on a master thoroughfare plan. So I hope that helps.
And what role does the RMA play in all of this?
We're a resource for them. As you know, the county, their road and bridge division, I forget, they've reorganized. I don't know exactly the name of that group now. It's not overly staffed, right? So we basically serve as a resource to them. And we've told them all along the way, just as we serve as a resource to them on the comprehensive mobility plan, we're here for them if they want us to assist with their master thoroughfare plan. Whatever it is they need, we're a resource to them, to the city, to any other agency that needs us. So we've made that offer, and as they move forward, I anticipate additional roles for this RMA with the county.
I see the 213 plan, which is kind of the synopsis that brings all this together, has got our name on it. So I'm not too sure how that fits.
So we were one of the members that developed the 2013 Comprehensive Mobility Plan. In fact, actually, if you go back, excuse me, the 2013 plan was actually modeled after the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, which was developed through a partnership between the City of El Paso, Texas Department of Transportation, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the Regional Mobility Authority, where we all came together and recognized that the MPO has a list of projects that are the priority projects for the region and go through that very strenuous process. However, there was also another list of projects that hadn't yet made it into the Metropolitan Planning Organization program, but the various entities, the city, the RMA, the TxDOT, all recognized that these were real priority projects. So that's how the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan was developed. It was an additional list of priorities that we all came together and agreed on, and then we rolled that program into the Metropolitan Planning Organization. That model is exactly what we did with the 2013 Comprehensive Mobility Plan. The distinction was, instead of the city, this was the county's slate of projects, along with some additional TxDOT programs, projects as well. So that's why we're involved in both of these comprehensive mobility plans.
Is there a consultant or engineering firm that works for the MPO that pulls all this together?
You know, they do have consultants, but I'm not overly familiar with how they operate over there, honestly.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Tejas, are we doing any outreach to residents and businesses along all these construction sites that we're going through? What is our community
Yes, ma'am.
outreach in there?
So we do some outreach. It's certainly not as robust as the streetcar because of the nature of those activities. However, we do have an outreach program. We use media outlets. We release press releases on occasion, especially when we're closing down roadways and have traffic control and that sort of thing. But we have a really good example is Vista del Sol. That's going to be a major inconvenience for the concrete plant and some of the trucking businesses along the route. So we've actually visited with them, gone door to door. Now there's only 3 or 4 of them, right? So it's not on the same scale as streetcar, but we have visited with them and let them know that we've opened up a new roadway. We've paved a whole section of a roadway that wasn't paved before to provide them with that alternative access. So we are doing outreach, yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. As long as we keep communicating, I think, to the community out there, I think that's important.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So with that, then we had the second PowerPoint is David Head is going to walk you all through the change orders, proposed change orders through the comprehensive mobility plan.
David Head with Atkins, GEC for the RMA. And let's go through these change orders. So this is the map of all the projects, and we're showing East Lake 2 there. Oh, okay. Let me get into this mode. Okay, so East Lake Phase 2, the change orders for that. The ones in green are what has been approved by the board. And then the 2 at the bottom in the yellow, if you will, 6 and 7 are what we're asking for approval today on. And so the number 6 is the El Paso Electric Company to furnish transformers for illumination. What this is we're putting out the illumination. We'd like to get it turned on, and with that we need the transformers from the electric company, and so the contractor is to get those, and then we compensate him for what the electric company puts in there. Change order number 7 is in the median. There were some trees that were supposed to stay. They're existing trees, and we found that those need to be removed because it conflicts with proposed work. We've got some illumination foundations and some landscaping lines that need to go in there, and so they've identified some trees that need to be removed from those areas. So that's those 2 change orders, 6 and 7. Were we taking these separately or all
Yeah,
together?
which is 5A and B.
So it's up to the
Yeah.
board. If you'd like, we can walk you through each of the change orders, and then you can take them all together if you'd like, for ease.
Anyone? Yeah, we'll go through all of them then.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll go through all of them and then we'll take them back.
So if we go on to Rojas Drive, I think we started talking about those a little bit in the update, but you have 2 that were approved to date, and then this one, number 3, is to reimburse the contractor for a payment to the Time Warner Cable for underground cable to be relocated. The county asked us to write a check for that to get the sub moving on that part of the work, so that is that change order.
Madam Chair, I've got a question on this
Mr.
one.
Neiman.
What, you mentioned that there's been it's been 3 months now that Time Warner's been working on this. Did I understand correctly?
I think working on it is loosely, but yes.
Has there been a cost to this project beyond $32,000 because of delays because of Time Warner?
There will be, we're anticipating something, but we're not there yet with the contractor because he still has work in the area. And so what we are directing the contractor to do is you have other areas of work that are critical on your path. And so when you finish those up, then we can talk about delays in those things.
Okay, so far, no.
Well, there are some inefficiencies that we haven't got to, but
Yeah, there have to be.
yes, yes, sir.
What are the rights? There's easements. Time Warner has an easement, correct?
I believe it is. I'm not sure about how the county structures their utilities. The way I understand it, talking with the county, is that basically they put their lines in there, and the county doesn't have a lot of they don't have a lot of strength to move them out. They just have to ask them. And now Time Warner may have an easement. I'm not sure about what that structure is.
It's normally a general utility easement, isn't it, Mr. Tays?
You know, honestly, I don't know the way that the county operates. So each entity have, each of the entities, municipal and county and others, governmental entities, have different relationships with the utilities. So I'm not familiar with the county at all.
So this is a conversation between the county and Time Warner that's
Yeah,
occurring?
yes, ma'am. And that's actually,
Right.
that's a really good point. So
Right.
the way that
County.
this comprehensive mobility plan program works is that the county retained all responsibility for clearing the right of way for us. So that means purchasing any right of way, granting access, removing utilities, and that type of thing. So we, as in effect, construction managers, we're on hold while the county works those things out. Similarly, the project that we're looking to let is East Lake 1, which has right-of-way acquisitions that are still underway with
Okay.
county. So on that one, we held that project back until the county completes its activities, and then we'll let it. And that's why when you see these change orders, like this one is a good example, we go and get written concurrence from the county on the change order itself as well as the amount. So we don't want to go anywhere without the county saying, yes, we negotiated it. Yes, we are comfortable with that number.
But this is all on the county.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll get this moving, so we don't have our contractor stopped and without doing any
work, basically, is what we're trying to achieve here.
Yes,
is
ma'am.
right.
He has had to jump around, and
Yeah.
he has some inefficiencies, but he's still working.
Okay.
And we anticipate Time Warner, they just ordered their fiber. We were hoping they already had it, but they did not. They said they needed to order it. And so we're anticipating several weeks before they can get that up and get their sub moving on it. They do have the check in hand. Old Waco Tanks Road. So the green is the ones that were approved. The gray are either pending or they've been deleted for one reason or another. And so the ones that we're talking about is 7 and 10, which are in yellow. So number 7 is at the gateway over by the interstate. There's some illumination poles that were existing that are in conflict with the intersection. And so we're relocating one and removing one. So you'll see that cost for $10,000 and change. And then number 10 at the bottom of the screen is the contractor. This was for the corn maze traffic control. And really the only way you could get in there was through North Loop and down the new roadway. So that was, the county had asked us to put that detour or that traffic control in so that they would have access to that.
If I could provide some background on this one as well. As you may recall, this one is so every one of our projects is unique for one reason or another, it seems like, right? There's no run-of-the-mill projects, but this one is unique for a couple of reasons. One of them, because TxDOT actually developed the design for this program, for this particular roadway. When they developed the design, they made certain commitments to this particular landowner. When you're driving down the roadway, he's in effect landlocked by Old Waco Tanks. And this landowner uses that land, of course, as mentioned, for the corn maze. So TxDOT started with a commitment saying, once it is being developed, we will grant you access during your very short period of activity. And the county has since reviewed that and has okayed that. So as part of your backup, you'll see that the county has provided the written approval of this particular change order.
So the TxDOT approves it, the county has to fund it.
Yes, sir.
It's the American way.
That'll take any other questions.
Any questions for Mr. Head? And these are all items A through E.
I have one question, Madam Chair. Let's say the cornfield as an cornfield access as an example. What if the board said no? I'm not suggesting we do, but it's money that's already been spent. And so, am I correct? And so you're asking for board approval?
Correct.
Okay. And you have the sign-off authority, and I don't have any problem with that, but why ask? Because what if the board said no?
Well, and so this is an item that I've mentioned to, I think, a couple of you on different occasions. The change order process that the RMA uses is one where I rely on the authority that's granted through the executive director position, and then usually come to you after the fact. And it's really a timing issue. It's to keep the project online and that sort of thing. The comprehensive mobility plan program is actually different, though, because the authority actually comes from the county because it's their funds. So say, for example, if the board wanted to direct $28,000 to the traffic control rather than the $18,000, you could direct me to do that. However, I wouldn't have the authority to do it under the underlying agreements with the county. So the authority on this one is a little bit unique. And I don't know that necessarily answers your question.
All right, but I think what the board's doing is we're affirming our director's decision or whatever.
It's a bit of a ratification.
You're not relying on board approval.
Well, it's a bit of a ratification, but it's a ratification more of the county's direction to make this payment.
It's under our agreement.
Does that help
I mean,
you at
that's-
all?
Right.
Okay. Move to approve.
Second. Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to approve items 5A through E. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, perfect. Okay, item number 6. Item number 6.
Yes, ma'am. If you'll read that into the record, we
Oh,
will.
sorry. Thank you. I got, the corn maze, I think, threw me off here. Item number 6, quarterly update on the El Paso streetcar project and discussion and action on board resolutions authorizing the following change orders to the construction contract with Paso del Norte Track Works. A, change order number 27, issues with overhead contact system pole placements. B, change order number 28, various items related to the traction power substations. C, change order number 29, addition of backfill at various project locations. Change order number 30, various maintenance and storage facility modifications. And E, change order number 31, additions to the Stanton Street cycle track. Now, Mr. Tez.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So we're going to follow the same procedure that we used on item number 5. We'll have 2 PowerPoints for you. The first one is the usual quarterly update from Gil Gardner, who's the construction manager for this particular project. And then we'll follow that up with a PowerPoint on the requested change orders for today on the El Paso streetcar. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Gardner to present.
Good morning. I'm Gil Gardner, the construction manager with the El Paso streetcar. Once again, this is another quarterly report. We're getting down towards the end. This is one that we're looking forward to presenting. I've got a lot of information for you here today. Let's see. The agenda is a progress summary. We'll go over the milestones and project progress to date, some of the document control issues that we've worked with, inspections a little more in depth in our quality assurance and quality control, some of the additional work that was added on to this project at the request of the city. We've added a section here in system safety because this is a big element as we go forward. Of course, we have a section on the vehicles, community involvement, which has been very, very important on this project, and then any questions you might have. The progress summary here, the project is on budget and it's still on schedule. The original contract sum was for $61,102,602. We had cost of change orders of $8.9 million for a total contract sum now of $70,002,191. The work completed to date is $63,700,775. Now, the breakdown of this is the base bid, which is the civil track work and maintenance facility, is $51,711,678,000. We had base bid 2, which is the wastewater replacement of $922,000. Base bid 3 was the potable water replacement project that we did. It was $3,197,000. And then base bid 4 was the CBD 4 work down in the Father Rom area that we did, was $2.271 million. The total change orders of this that were associated with the initial contract was $5.6 million. The rest of the change orders were all additional work requested by the city. Some of the project progress that we've got today. This one here, we had a requirement for subcontractors, obviously. The subcontractors performed 26% of the work to date, such as the MSF building, the OCS poles, foundations, traffic control, quality control, signing and striping, electrical work, and other smaller ones. Approximately 40% of the subs that were used on this project were local and were DBEs. We expect all of the subs to complete their work in April of 2015 when we do our final testing. Work done to date that we've done is all of the demolition and excavation. We've completed the MSF building. Grading and pavement has all been completed. We have put in all of the OCS pole foundations. We're in the process now of completing the poles and the wire stringing downtown loop, and then we'll be working on the uptown early next year. All of the utility relocations we're in the process of completing and finalizing. The civil and track work is all done. The civil is mostly done. And then the bridge overlay work that we did on I-10. Some of the work that's left to do here is we need to complete the stringing of the wire in the uptown loop, which will be done next year. Signage and striping, we're actually doing that now. If you're out on some of the streets, especially going up Stanton, we're completing the signing and striping on that. We've got a staff out. In fact, they had a meeting this morning on the signing. We're working very, very closely with city streets and maintenance to make certain that we've got the right signs in the right location. So we're working closely with them. We have additional work on Cincinnati. This is the add-on work, Cincinnati and Father Rom improvements. We'll actually be paving Cincinnati this coming Thursday, but we have some additional concrete work and other work that's being done along Cincinnati at the request of the city. Father Rom, agreed we're doing curb and flat work on the Father Rom area. We've just about finished that up. That's been cleaned up right now. We'll be putting in some of the, not landscaping, but decomposed granite to finalize that and get out of there before Thanksgiving. Primarily what the contractor's doing now is working on the cleanup and the punch list. As we said, we pretty well cleaned up everything. They're actually working on the punch list now, going down and correcting things, adding things here. We have a testing and startup program, which will be starting the latter part of this year and then continuing into next year as we do the complete testing and startup as the vehicles arrive.
Mr. Wardy has a question.
May I stop you for a moment? I have a concern, and I want to preface my question. So if there is an accident that occurs because of improper, traffic control devices during construction, who has liability on that?
The contractor. The contractor owns the project site until we take it back.
The only reason I bring it up is because I drive regularly. I turn off of Schuster north on Stanton. And as you pass the light and you start to come down, there is a 2-foot concrete unpainted berm that I think is an invitation for disaster. Somebody's going to hit it and cause major vehicle damage and maybe damage somebody else's vehicle. And it doesn't seem like there's anything to prevent anybody from doing I don't like to use that word, but a thoughtless act to go through there. Is that where the boarding point is going to be?
Do you know where that is, Mr. Gardner?
You know what I'm
where
talking
you're
about, Mr. Gardner?
I think you're talking about the boarding station if you're heading north right before you get to the Fairmont.
Yes.
Okay,
That
yes,
is the
that
boarding
is a
station.
little curb, and in fact, we've addressed that. One of the things that we've asked the contractor to do on that one is to, first of all, complete the painting, the striping on the gore that makes certain that that guides the vehicle away from that. The second thing that they're going to do is to actually stripe and paint that with vertical, or not vertical, but the correct striping, you might say, in color, to make it reflective so that they actually see it, because you're correct. Right now it's sort of plain concrete and it's not real noticeable, so they've been directed to do that.
I just know people have been doing really crazy things with the traffic congestion. This is silly season in El Paso.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was a matter of time before somebody tries to beat something and hits that and then loses control and hits another vehicle. That was the source of my question. I'm not trying to micromanage the project.
I think it's a good
I
point.
understand, and that
Good
has a
point.
concern of ours, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think at one point we had barricades put up to protect against that. But I will mention in the long term, when we put the street furniture in, there'll be handrails, and potentially canopies and the whole thing. Once all of that is installed, it will really stand out at that point. But you're right. In this interim period, the additional reflective paint and that other sort of stuff will help.
Thank you very much.
Just as an aside, we have brought aboard, not we have, but the Sun Metro has now brought aboard the System Safety Manager. I can't remember his official title. Jose Marquez, who is a certified safety specialist related to this type of facility here. And he's been working very, very closely with us and trying to identify these little areas here that he thinks may be a problem, may be an issue. And the contractor has been very, very good about responding to his concerns. You know, so the next item, document control. As you know, this has been, and this is or will be an all electronic. When we finish up this project, 95% of the documents that we have will be in electronic format. We're using new CRRMA for all of the submittals, the RFIs and emails. The idea being is that when we finish this job, whenever all of the paperwork is done, then we'll give the disk and hand over all of the electronic files to Sun Metro, and we'll say, here they are. Obviously, we'll have a backup file too, but instead of having a whole closet full of paper documents, we're trying to do this electronically. And this is a method that we have been using ProjectWise, which is a software that Atkins uses. And then if you're out there and you've looked in the field and stuff, and you might occasionally have seen some of the workers, some of the superintendents out there. I don't have mine, well, mine's in my briefcase, but they've got their iPads. So instead of having a set of plans in the back of the pickup that they pull out and they look at at times like this, they pull up this pad, look at it, and they use Plan Grid, which is all on the drawing there. And if they make changes, they actually make them in the field right there on the plans. So they're keeping much, much better control of the marked up plans and the as-built. So, and then it'll be used to print out the as-built in either electronic form or if needed by the city, you know, they can actually print them out if they want to print out of them. The other aspect of document control is we all recognize this is a TxDOT funded project, so we're having to follow the TxDOT procedures for local government projects. We have, in our office alone, we have 2, maybe 3 certified people that are certified in it. The executive director of RMA just went through the certification process of the local projects. We'll be prepared, we expect, and we'll have a final audit, and we're looking forward to it. We expect to pass it as well as we passed it the first time. We expect to pass it the next time. Of the submittals that we've had to date, we've received 550. We've managed to close out 546. We still have 4 that we're currently reviewing. RFIs, we've received 430. We've closed out 425. We've got 5 that we're currently reviewing. Hopefully, a couple of them we're taking care of today. On the pay estimates, we have processed 21 pay estimates to date for a total of $63,700,775. Of the change orders, we've received 67 change proposals, and these are little bits and pieces where we'll combine them into one change order. Or, you know, instead of giving you 67 change orders, we group them logically. The total cost of the change orders is this $8.899 million that's to date, including the proposed for today. Inspections. The inspections were performed on this project by a sub-consultant to Atkins, 2 of them actually, ECM and AIA. AIA inspected, provided the inspection for the maintenance facility. ECM provided the inspection for the civil and track work facility. While I'm here, I'd like to really extend appreciation to both firms for providing this. They gave us some really quality people who paid attention, who some of them had to learn some of the new process and everything like this, but they did it willingly, and we're very pleased with the effort that they put in.
Both local companies.
Pardon?
Both local companies.
Local company,
They're local
ECM? Yeah, they're both local companies.
Right.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Good.
they've been here a long time.
Just wanted to note that.
Well,
Oh.
so I would note AIA is actually, has a
They're
local
actually different.
office.
Local office. okay.
Yes.
But they have a local office.
Right.
Yeah. We did 40 biweekly traffic control inspections. We did 47 biweekly SWIP inspections in order to keep the drainage down. We've hosted 46 quality assurance meetings. We performed 7 quarterly labor interviews to meet the contract requirements and wrote over 700 daily inspection reports, and these will all be part of the contract documentation. They also oversaw, scheduled, and managed the QA testing that was done by CQC, which is another one of our consultants. As I said, CQC performed 63 concrete tests to date, 25 Proctor tests, over 286 density tests, and 284 HMAC density tests, which is a different type. Quality control testing was done under the responsibility of the contractor. That was performed by AMEC, and they have tested over 480 batches of concrete and took over 1,300 density tests during the course of this contract here in order to maintain quality control. The additional work that was done under this project was the farther Wam sidewalk improvements, and this was city funded. It's currently underway. We expect to complete it all, including the punch list, by the end of the month. The cost of that was like $173,363 additional funds provided by the city. The Cincinnati pedestrian improvements was another one, which is city funded. It's currently underway. They expect to be complete with it by the end of the year. The cost of that is $2.610 million, and those funds were provided by the city. Other potential additional work was Oregon signing and striping. They'd originally combined a whole project they wanted us to do, which was the Oregon lighting and then the signing and striping. They had difficulty with city funding on the Oregon lighting, so we haven't included it, but they did ask us to include and provided the funds available for the signing and striping, and that's what we've done on there, and in fact they're in the process. We did that change order last month, or in September, I believe, and they're working on that right now. The Oregon lighting project is on hold. Its cost of it's about $942,000, but the city has not committed the funds yet, and we're not going to give them a change order unless and until they do. On system safety, and this is a new element that we're presenting this quarter here. This project has to be approved and certified by the TxDOT State Safety Oversight Officer, System Safety Oversight Officer. They visited, they requested that 6 documents be delivered. Sun Metro has delivered the documents, and they're currently in discussion with the SSO. The process of getting that certification is quite extensive and will take several months before it finally gets certified. Sun Metro is in the process right now of hiring staff. They've developed a hiring plan. They hired an assistant director and safety security manager, who I mentioned just a few minutes ago. They're in the process right now of hiring a maintenance superintendent, and I think they've just done their interviews. They hope to hire that person here within the next week or so. They will be going hiring trainers, technicians, supervisors, and operators as they get ready to take over the operation. They're preparing right now. We're working with them very closely to prepare for the pre-revenue service phase and the revenue service phase. As I said, Sun Metro is working on the documents. We've got our safety person going through the maintenance facility so we can certify the maintenance facility. They're developing initial operating procedures that they'll be using. We've actually started, they formed and started the Fire Life Safety and Rail Activation Committees, which will have their first meeting here within the next few days. They're developing checklists and correcting issues as they've been pointed out, that we sit down with the contractor, we identify potential safety issues that we need to take a look at. Most of them are rather minor. One like you brought up there, you know, we flagged that, trying to correct it, make certain it's done correctly. Next item is the PCC vehicles. This has been on here. The contract value at award was $18,794,265. There have been 2 amendments to date for a total of $266,976 for current contract value of a little over $19 million. They've invoiced to date a total of $9,375,258 for a percentage completion of about 49% to date. The work includes the 6 vehicles, the system support, the training, and the spare parts for the vehicles. These are some of the shots of the vehicles. This is interior. Is that vehicle number 1, Chuck?
Yes, sir.
This is the interior right now, current interior of what vehicle number 1's going to look like. As you can see, they've started the painting. It's really coming out there. That's a little wide angle shot, so it looks a little interesting, but it's a, you know, it's kind of the condition. On the PCZ vehicles, when we get the first vehicle in, we'll do a burn-in on it, and the burn-in is it's a 200-mile run. They have to run 200 miles with no more than a 5-minute delay caused by a failure. And it has to start, stop, and remain stationary on maximum grades, you know, to make certain it can stay there. If the delay is more than 5 minutes, you know, if there's a stop or breakdown or whatever it is, then they have to start the 200 miles all over again. So anyway, the other 5 vehicles, the burn-in will be 50 miles, and it's kind of simulated revenue service. So that'll be mostly done during the pre-revenue phase. Of the vehicles, they've approved designs for the passenger seat, all of the interior and floor panels, the bike rack, the lighting, the windows, the operator cabin console. That's all now been approved. The HVAC is approved and design, the traction motor, gearbox. Special importance is the wheelchair lift and the communication system integration. These vehicles will have Wi-Fi, PA, TWC, and closed-circuit TV on them. Here's the status of the vehicle. The first vehicle is in final assembly. They're putting it finally together. The second vehicle is soon to finish the body repairs and then start into painting. The third vehicle has already started undergoing body repairs. The fourth vehicle, they're finishing their lead paint abatement and waiting for the body repairs, and the fifth and sixth vehicles are ready for the lead paint abatement. On community involvement, we've had an extensive community involvement program over the past 2.5 years. The public PR has been done by Barracuda. We've issued over 70 news releases, sent out 97 direct mail, put up 416 social media posts on Facebook, and distributed 1,850 bilingual leaflets informing the locals of what we're doing. We've also hosted weekly and bi-weekly stakeholders meetings, performed door-to-door outreach of key shareholders or our stakeholders in both the downtown and the Stanton area there to make certain they were aware of what's going on. And we've coordinated with the major events like the Celebration of Lights, Neon Desert, and the Winterfest. We've always worked to coordinate those so our work doesn't interfere with them. We've hosted major event weeks such as Engineer Weeks. We had an open house at both Sacred Heart, Don Haskins Center, and Cathedral High School. We provided and did a MSF hard hat tour with the public and with the news. We had a presentation of the first OCS pole and then the final rail welding that we did. And then we had a rail signing signature when we did the final rail on that one. And that's it on the presentation. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Mr. Wardy?
If anybody's traveled, which I'm sure most everybody has, you've seen and ridden the trolleys like in Portland or other cities. Is the revenue portion of it, the machines and all that stuff, is that part of the project from us, or is that something Sun Metro is going to install afterwards in the vehicles and the stations? I'm just curious how that works, because that's pretty high-tech stuff.
So the fare boxes are actually being provided by Sun Metro. They've been shipped to Brookville, and they will be installed as part of our contract, but being provided by the city of El Paso.
It's the same system that Sun Metro uses
That's
in
right.
all,
It's the
in
exact
their-
same system.
in the buses and Brio.
Now, I know that for some time, Sun Metro has been looking at tap cards and some improvements, but we're using the exact system that they have out there on their existing.
So we're not going to an electronic system where you enter and, oh,
No, sir.
that's a disappointment, personally.
Mr. Smith?
The project itself and how that works, it appears to me, just my studies of it, it's very complex and very, very well done, I might add, as far as what I've been able to observe as to your management of it. Because it's as complex a project with as many moving parts as I've seen in a long time. So kudos to you for what, from my perspective, what I've seen and what I learned on my tour. My question is on the pieces that are out there, like the car renovation in Pennsylvania, how do you manage that? And what is your responsibility as far as that goes?
I actually have two roles on the project here. One of them is the construction manager of the infrastructure. The other role is the program manager of the overall streetcar project. The consultant who's responsible for the streetcar itself is AECOM. That is part of theirs, and they have a vehicle specialist, LTK, that manages that, work closely with them. And in fact, AECOM is here today, and they manage that. As part of my role as a program manager, I verify that they're on the schedule. I work closely with them, that they're keeping on schedule, they're keeping on budget, because there is an integration issue. And in fact, one of the key elements that we do is to make certain that what we're building here will fit the vehicle, and vice versa, the vehicle will fit what's there. And these guys they're professionals at it. They know what they're doing, and I've got great confidence in their ability, both AECOMs and LTK as a vehicle sub. So we have bi-weekly phone calls with them, don't we? Weekly phone calls as to the status of the manufacturing of what they're doing over there. LTK actually has an office in Pennsylvania, so they can just step over there real shortly if there's a question. They got to look at it.
And one last question on the test of the first car and the follow-on cars. Is that done on site on this equipment, or is it done on a treadmill somewhere?
Yeah. This will be interesting. I'm looking forward to it coming. The first vehicle will be delivered on a big flat car that comes off here. It'll actually be pretty much all put together, with the exception, I think the pantograph won't be on. They'll have to put it on later. It will come, we'll move it into, by hand, or push it, you might say, into the maintenance facility so they can finish assembling it, which is to put the pantograph on, do some tests, we'll fire it up. Then they will pull it out. By that time, we will have made the downtown loop available for the vehicle to run its test. And then we will, by utilizing the downtown loop and in certain areas even the uptown loop, so it can complete its 200-mile burn-in test. And that vehicle, that will start the early, I would say, that'll probably start sometime in February or early March is when that vehicle will start running, and we'll be doing the testing on it.
Well, I understood the test would be at grade.
Yes, it'll be.
So that implies you'll be doing some Stanton Street uphill, correct?
Right, and it will be, we will test the grade, that maximum grade up Stanton there, that one section there. The vehicle will go up there, and one of the key elements, there'll be two of them. One of them makes certain it goes up. We're very confident it can do it. The other one is we'll go up there right south of, probably south of Stanton. Or Schuster, we'll stop the vehicle and make certain that vehicle doesn't move, you know. And there will be test vehicles to verify if the vehicle starts slipping. We're not going to allow it to run downhill. And by the way, all of this burn-in will be done at night. We won't be doing this during heavy traffic. This will all be done more at night while we're testing it and everything. Okay?
So that burn-in is not just a burn-in of the car itself, it's the whole system.
Oh, the whole system, yeah. The whole system. We've got several months of testing and commissioning that we'll be working through for both the system and for the vehicles. It's not just you go out, well, here's a vehicle, turn the key, and you can go off running down. They work together. You brought a good point. It's almost like a hospital, a vertical construction. All the pieces have to work together. And for the next few months, that's what we're doing. We're verifying they're going to work together.
And Mr. Gardner, we do have to have a state certification. Do we not have to get some sort of,
Yeah.
through is it the Texas Railroad, or who certifies us from this?
The
oversees-
TxDOT
that oversee-
certifies it,
So
yeah.
through TxDOT?
At the end of it, they will come in and they will certify it. They'll say, yep, you're ready to go. You know, you can start running passengers.
Mr. Neighbor, did you have
Thank
some
you.
more questions?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
All right.
Do you want to be there when they?
I do. I want to ride. Or maybe not. 200 miles is going to take a lot of hours, I think.
Well, with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Gardner to present the PowerPoint on the proposed change orders for today's agenda. But before we do that, I want to note a couple of things. We've talked about change orders from the streetcar. If you remember, I gave a presentation, I want to say in September, outlining the change orders for this particular project, how they are unique. We think we're really, as was mentioned by Mr. Gardner, we're getting very close to the end of the project. So we're starting to wrap up these change orders. We currently are aware of 3 additional change orders that we will be bringing. It's change orders 25, 26, and then there will be a number 32. So 25 and 26 will be brought to you hopefully in December. And then 32 is intended to be more of a wrap-up. If you recall the Mission Ridge project, we came to you with one final change order that had all of the overruns, the underruns, and really kind of wrapped everything up in a bow. So we're anticipating those 3 change orders for sure, because we are so close to the end of the construction activities. However, there may be 1 or 2 additional small ones thereafter. However, the point that I'm getting to, though, is as we close out these change orders for the work that needs to get done, at that point then, if you recall, we've talked for some time about how the remaining change orders will be owner-initiated change orders. And the intent really is to use the remaining grant funds to go back and secure those project items that we had originally pulled out of the project and placed in a contingency fund. So what I will, really kind of long story short, I will be back to you hopefully in December with the updated PowerPoint presentation showing all of the change orders we've seen to date, showing the additional 3 that we're aware of today, any additional ones that have come up between now and December. And then finally, at that point, we'll have a round number to begin looking at those additional items that we can begin to pull back into the project as referenced owner-initiated change order. So anyhow, a lot of words to say. We're getting close to the end of the project. But with that, I'll ask Mr. Gardner to present the remaining change orders for today.
Yeah, I'm Gil Gardner, the construction manager for the El Paso streetcar. I'm going to go over change orders 27 to 31 today here. As I said, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 change orders we're going through. I'll give you a change order summary and then any questions. The first change order 27, are the OCS pole and sidewalk issues. A couple of them is that the shaft was drilled through the basement there at the Bank of Texas, and we had to work around that and ended up having to do quite a bit of work on the floor of the Bank of Texas because the location of the shaft changed prior to pouring. So we had 2 locations required new decks and extra work down in there. This change order covers the cost in that. And then on the building at the northeast corner of Santa Fe and San Antonio, we had conflict with spread foundations. So we had to relocate the OCS shaft in order to be able to do that. And the 4 locations, they needed a new floor and deck because of the basements and the spread foundations. Same thing with BBVA Compass Bank. We had to remove the sidewalk removal and damage the bases. When it did that, the curb access didn't fit, had to be redesigned, and repaired the basement and the adjacent vault. And I'd like to point out on this is all caused by unforeseen underground conditions as opposed to something that was strictly obvious. It would have not been obvious till we went in there and dug into it and realized what happened. In addition to that, as part of change order, because of that, and we had to relocate some of the foundations and some of the poles, especially we had to move them away from the edge of sidewalk a little further back in order to avoid a lot of the utility lines and stuff. That caused the OCS support system and components to change somewhat. The poles, the cantilever poles had to be extended, so we had to purchase additional materials in order to be able to do that. We had one RFI that they weren't really incorrect assembly in the contract drawings. It was trying to do 2 things at once, which kind of confused things. The assembly components were revised, and we kind of had to purchase some new components on that. It was a fairly small amount. Anyway, the total on these work items, the work on the sidewalk, the basement deck, and back on the floor was $18,000. The concrete dollar and deck patch, especially at the bank, was $31,000. Where we had to repair the BBVA Compass Bank basement was $5,400. The OCS complex on Santa Fe north of Paisano, that cost us $65,000. And then the revised assembly components was a total of about $46,700, that additional purchase. The total on this was $173,303.65. The next change order was change order 28. Is the university required that the fencing around TPSS 1 be wrought iron fencing rather than, I think we originally had chain link fence, and it was, they requested that we do wrought iron more for to architectural part. And this was part of the negotiations with the university on the lease agreement. So we had to install or ask to get a price on the wrought, it hadn't been installed yet, on the wrought iron fence. And then in addition to that, the system safety person requested that we install bollards at some of the other TPSS units to protect against the building, somebody running into it, because in all of the others, it could be hit by a vehicle, either at the maintenance facility or whatever it is. So these included the bollards. The wrought iron fence is approximately a total length of 120 linear feet. We're using the same style of the fence down as the maintenance facility, and it's painted brown instead of black to match the TPSS one. And then the other element of that was temporary power to the traction power substations. Now, this temporary power was needed because this is highly sensitive electronic equipment in there in a metal building that has essentially air conditioning. These units are air conditioned. And because of the negotiations with El Paso and Electric and the length of time that it was taken to do it, and this is during the summer, the contractor, in accordance with the specifications, had to provide, but the owner would pay for the temporary power to keep these units air conditioned until we got the power to the TPSS units, and that's what this was here. The cost, so the cost of all of this was the removable bollards that they asked us to put in was $17,700. We had some permanent bollards at $12,800. The wrought iron fence to go around TPSS1 was $57,976. It's a lot of fence, and it's all wrought iron and everything. The chain link fence, we got a credit of $12,000 on the chain link fence because that's what we'd originally had. And then the temporary power was $23,145. That was the cost of renting the units, running them during the period of time during the hot summer time, for a total of $99,681.30. You question?
Did you have a question? Mr.
Where is the station on university property?
It's right there at the transfer,
Transfer
the bus,
station.
the parking facility.
Oh,
right
okay.
on Glory.
All right.
You know where the Brio stop is?
Yes.
It's right behind the Brio stop.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And remind me, how many feet, linear feet?
120 linear feet.
And it costs 57,000 for 100?
We did get a $12,000 credit for the chain link fence, but yeah.
Wow, that's pretty, that wrought iron fence is pretty
It
expensive,
is,
isn't
it is very architecturally rendered. It's the same style that is down at the maintenance facility. So it's a high security fence is what it is. It's not just a typical wrought iron fence that you'd put around your yard. They wanted a security fence. So it's a bigger piece of metal than what I'd put in my front yard. Change order 29 is flowable backfill. What this one was for is, as you know, as we were doing a lot of this work, we ran into a lot of existing utilities, a lot of them communications lines, water lines, running all over the place. Sometimes just right underneath the slab as we did the work. And they were such tight in such locations we were not able to use standard compaction facilities there. So what we did is that we took a line item from the price from a line item bid under base bid 4, because this is under most of the main line, and use this flowable backfill to fill in those utility lines, because had we tried to use the normal methods, we would have probably crushed a lot of those utilities and the cost would have been significantly higher. So that's what this was here. We used that one, and it's kind of an overrun on bid item 4, but because that's CBD 4, we wanted to give it a new bid item and show it, because this is in the rest of the area there. And that's $38,850.
Mr. Smith?
Question, is that just a standard 2-sack mix?
It's like a 2-sack mix, yeah. I mean, we just had a bunch of utilities that, communications line, conduits, and everything that rather than trying to relocate them, because we'd had to pay for the relocation, that was our method, the best way to do to protect them so we could work with them. Change order number 30 is some minor modifications at the MSF, and the first one are on the angles on the maintenance pit. Now, what we did is that as they designed and they constructed the maintenance pit, where the vehicle goes in, there were some angle iron supports on one side of it. And the vehicle consultant did an analysis and looked at it. And while the angle iron per pit, the design and the construction was in conformance, it was very, very close to the vehicle, and we were a little uncomfortable that we were just concerned that maybe the first vehicle might come in and no problem, but these vehicles aren't absolutely standard vehicles. Mine might be a little bit bigger than the other one. So what we did is we had them cut it back and trim it such that we gave more clearance, more structural clearance to the vehicle. It's not a design issue, it was really more of a safety issue. An additional safety thing was after we did our safety walkthrough, we identified some railing that we wanted to add on that, more kind of a belts and suspenders type thing on safety. Once again, it's not a design issue, it was just whenever the safety guy got in there and took a look at it and said, hey, let's do this. We also needed to add some additional breakers because whenever they installed sump pumps and the fire alarm, and especially when they put the vortex system in, which was done under another change order, we inadvertently used a breaker that was going to be used by the TPSS unit, so we had to, they were used for those items, so we had to install those breakers. You know, we had thought they were spare. They weren't. They were actually for the TPSS unit, so we had to put additional breakers in there. And then one other item was a swing gate to replace a handrail at the mezzanine, and it gives proper functionality to it. If you look there, the price on that, this is fairly small. It was about $6,000 just to cut the angles and clean them up. The additional breakers was $1,800, and then the swing gate on the mezzanine was $2,500 for a total of a little over $10,000. Change order 31 on the Stanton Street bike lane. The city streets and maintenance, they'd done a design and the striping plans. The city streets maintenance came back, and we've been, as we said, we've been working very, very closely with them. And what they ask us to do is to damn near double the number of delineators along the bike trail. They ask us to add additional delineators in there and install raised pavement markers to help delineate that, and then install some sharrows on the bike lane in certain areas there. And this change order here covers that request from the city. The amount on that was a total of $28,324.82. As you can see, the delineators was about $18,000. These are the panels that stick up. The yellow delineator assembly is a couple of thousand. The pavement, we had to prepare the pavement for the reflective pavement marker, and then the prefabricated pavement marking for the sharrows. And the symbols are $6,000 for the total of $28,000. That's a change order summary here for a total of these change orders 27 through 31 for a total change order of $350,189. That brings the total cost of the change orders 1 to 31 of $8,899,588.56. The project still remains on schedule, and it is still within the budget.
Questions? Mr. Smith?
How do we cost control change orders? When we go out for a project, we get bids, we do all these other kinds of stuff. The reputation of change orders is pretty well known extensively around the world.
Right.
How do we control these costs, like the wrought iron fencing and
What we do, what the contractor does, this contractor has been very, very good at getting a detailed backup on this. They give us the detail, in fact, the cost of the materials from the supplier, like in the case of the wrought iron fence, the materials from the supplier, the cost of all of his labor costs that goes in there, including the hours anticipated. We set down whether we agree with the hours or not agree with the hours. He has a standard overhead price that he uses, 5% markup, which is in accordance with the contract documents. I agree with you. A rule of thumb, I used to say that if you add something onto a change order, an add-on change order, sometimes you can pay as much as 3 to 4 times what it's worth. If you have a deductive change order where you subtract something from it, you're lucky to get 25 cents on the dollar, depending upon what you look at. This particular contract here, I'd be more than happy to share with you the level of detail that they provide to us. So it gives us the ability to go through it and identify where we think they're high on it. With this contractor also, it comes back in, and I'm talking about the prime. Sometimes we have a little different issue with the subs. But the prime comes back in, and especially with the supplier, if he thinks the supplier's price is too high, he'll actually go out and get additional quotes from other suppliers to give us a reasonable confidence level that we've gotten the best price that we can get.
So before it gets here, it goes through your litmus test and your litmus test?
Very, very
Yes, sir.
expensive test that we verify what the cost is.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Gardner or for Mr. Tez? So that's item 6A, B, C, D, and E.
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so item number 6 has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Mr. Barry as well, thank you. Item number 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a supplement to the third amendment of an assigned agreement for professional services with the URS Corporation for the El Paso streetcar project. Mr. Tez.
Thank you. So this one requires a bit of background as well. If you recall, at the very beginning of this project, this was a City of El Paso project where they hired an engineering firm by the name of URS, and that firm was tasked with developing the environmental and preliminary engineering work for the streetcar. So that laid out the route, it identified which vehicles they were looking to remanufacture and basically develop the system for them. After that original relationship, they actually amended their agreement to allow, to allow URS to expand their scope of services to actually complete the complete design documents for the streetcar project. So once those designs were complete, and in truth, I think they got to about 95% completion. At that point, then the Texas Department of Transportation provided the $97 million to the Regional Mobility Authority. And at that point, the City of El Paso then assigned the URS agreement that it had entered into with URS. It assigned those services over to the Regional Mobility Authority. So in essence, what happened is that the RMA stepped in, TxDOT brought the construction funding, and the City of El Paso assigned their relationship with URS over to the Regional Mobility Authority. And that's how we developed our relationship. So from there, that assigned document, we then entered into several amendments with URS as well. URS, incidentally, you've likely heard URS and AECOM. URS was eventually bought out by AECOM. However, our relationship with them continues under the URS name. But anyhow, so once that agreement was assigned over to the Regional Mobility Authority, then we entered into an initial amendment with URS, and a representative from URS is here should he have any questions, or if I go off the rails with this one. But we had entered into an original amendment that granted specific funds to URS to complete the design activities that were necessary to get it to 100%. Then we entered into a second amendment that the scope of work on that second amendment was to get through the procurement process. And then the third amendment was an amendment that provided funds and the scope of service to go through what is referred to as design services during construction. So when you when you hire an engineer to develop the design work for a particular project, then when you move into construction, you usually will hire that same engineer to help through construction activities. So the types of services include, like when the contractor will have a question about a certain design sheet, they'll submit what's called an RFI, request for information. That RFI will then go to the engineer of record, and that agreement for design services during construction is how you utilize that engineer going through the construction activities. Anyhow, that was the third amendment. So what you see before you today as a supplement to that third amendment is really adding additional scope and additional funds to get through the remainder of the project. So what, in essence, this amounts to is when you look at some of the additional activities that we added to this project that weren't originally anticipated, and specifically I'm thinking about Stanton Street, there were some activities at the MSF that weren't originally anticipated. When you look at those additional activities, then URS has come close to exhausting some of their line items for their subs. So what you see under this supplement is the addition of additional funds and additional scope to retain URS through the remainder of the project. The main one you'll notice in there is LTK, which is a sub to URS. LTK is the vehicle specialists that you heard Mr. Gardner speak about earlier. They're really important to us because they are the folks that have the specialized expertise that knows how to manage a Brookville Equipment Corporation and that type of thing. So anyhow, you'll also notice as Exhibit B, I believe it is in this supplement, that there were certain deductions that we received because in the original amendment number 3, we were anticipating more activities in certain areas and less than actual. So you'll see some credits and some requests for additional funds. So with that, in the end, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's an increase of about $163,000. But subject to your questions, I would recommend approval. And as I mentioned, there is a URS representative here should you have any questions of the consultant.
Questions, Mr. Wardy?
So was LTK plan part of the process from day one, or?
It was, yes, sir. But I think, in essence, the scope and the fee that was included for LTK was less than was actually anticipated and less than we're really using.
Well,
But I'd ask Mr. Berry
I'd really
to
like to
kind
know
of
why
expand on
it's
that.
an additional $230,000.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I think a couple of you haven't gotten to speak in front of before today. My name is Chuck Berry. I'm with AECOM, representing the contract we have with you as our former business name, URS. LTK has been a part of the project since the beginning. I think the basis for coming back and requesting for more funds for particularly LTK and a couple of the other subs was that when we entered into this work at the end of 2015, it was unclear the level of effort that was going to be necessary. And typically what we would do in a civil works contract is make sure that we had enough contingency on board to cover anything that might happen. I approached Raymond with a different concept of, Raymond, maybe the RMA should hold those contingencies. We'll come in with our best price, but in order for us to bring in a price back to the RMA that would guarantee that we not have to come back to you, I would very possibly be holding $200,000 or $300,000 in our contract at the end of the work. Because of the nature of the funding coming from TxDOT and everything has to go back to the streetcar, I suggested this approach. We took that approach, and as a result, I felt it might be necessary to come back in the future, but I didn't want to hold a whole lot of contingency on our contract and not have it available to y'all for the use on the project. And rather, the RMA held our contingency, and with that, I needed to come back and request additional funds to finish out the work. You'll notice that we're in the last 6 months, or, well, with respect to the vehicle contract, we probably have 9 months to go. And we've been putting off this and sharpening pencils and extrapolating projections to get to a number that would be reasonable. And right now I'm running on fumes. So that's a very long explanation for how we got here, but I still think it's a preferred approach from the RMA's perspective, particularly in light of the format that how the project was funded. The only place you can use that money is on the streetcar, and I wanted the RMA to continue to hold as much of that money as possible.
And to provide a little more context for when that decision was made, that was a time when TxDOT made extremely clear that there wasn't going to be another dime coming from TxDOT. The city of El Paso at the time was very clear that they were not going to provide any funding for the project, and so there was a lot of that going on. So at the time, we were very concerned about the contingency fund that we had. So as Mr. Berry mentioned, that hopefully that at least that provides some context for how that decision was made at the time.
So these are items that we left out or tried to,
No,
no?
I don't
Yeah,
think
give me
it's
some clarity. I'm
characterized
trying to
that way.
understand that.
sure. So I think
The scope of
in
work has
essence,
changed?
the scope didn't change. And correct me if I'm wrong,
That's
but
correct.
the scope didn't change. The level of effort that we anticipated, we scaled back.
Well, that begs another question. So did LTK underestimate what their charges would be for the deliverable that they committed to you?
No, they did not. In fact, they actually proposed a very much larger number to me the first time that I saw their number. Very much larger than what we're coming back to you for. I was the one that reduced their fee to a level that seemed appropriate at the time. If you recall, this is about the end of 2015, and we don't know. We knew Brookville had a contract, and we knew that Granite had a contract. No, I would not say that LTK had overlooked any scope of work. If anything, it was my unwillingness to fully fund what they were requesting and take those numbers to the executive director.
So the additional work was sitting in the contingency fund? I don't know what I'm
I
understanding.
try to want to get away from additional work. If you recall, our work with y'all is time and materials. It's not unit priced. So the only work we get paid for is the work that we are requested to perform on the project on a time and material basis. So it's not like we overlooked any work. Perhaps it was my personal underestimation of the level of effort that it was going to be necessary to reach that point.
So this is going to fund additional time that we need to finish this project?
Correct.
So we need to
Yes,
get
ma'am.
this done
Yeah.
because we need that time and your effort and expertise in order to finish this project.
Yes, ma'am.
So let me try it a different way. Hopefully this will help. When we were negotiating this agreement, we had a lot of unknowns, right? We don't have a lot of experience with remanufacture of PCC or any vehicles for that matter. So when LTK came in with their original proposal, it was significantly higher than as you heard Chuck, Mr. Berry was comfortable with presenting to me. Although we did have a discussion about it, and I was very uncomfortable with that number. I felt it was extremely high. So they went back and they scaled back, and really what that means is LTK was offering the Cadillac version of hand-holding at every level, going to every meeting, high-level individuals at every meeting, that type of thing. Really I shouldn't say over-resourced. That's not appropriate.
It's not the
but-
RMA way, is what I think I came to comfort level with. The RMA way is give us what we need and what needs to be done, but not a whole lot more than that.
Right. So we streamlined that original proposal significantly, and we shaved it down. And then at that point, that's when we had the additional discussion about how many hours are we putting into this and that sort of thing. So at that point, it was still a little bit high for my tastes. And at that point, Mr. Berry carved off several additional $100,000. And when he says he left it in our contingency, really what that means is he brought a lesser amount to us.
Okay.
So that extra $400,000, rather than being locked up in a contract where we can't access it because it's in his contract and he has access to it, we kept it in our contingency fund. So that's hopefully
Yeah.
that makes a little more
Yeah.
sense. So now that we know, we've spent a lot more time with Brookville, we've spent a lot of time with LTK, we understand the services that they can provide, and we have a better feel for where we are in terms of our knowledge base. We have Mr. Gardner with us, who's got a ton of experience related to this sort of thing, and now we have a better feel for exactly the services and more importantly, the resources and the hours that we need from LTK. Now we're coming to you with a final request saying this is what we need to get from here to the end zone. So I hope that helps a little more.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Berry? No? Okay. We
Thank you,
haven't
ma'am.
lost our quorum. Thank you, Mr. Berry. We still have our quorum, right?
Yes, we have quorum. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. To entertain a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Item number 7 is passed. Item number 8, update, discussion, and action on RMA's review of policy and process changes for protection of RMA assets. Mr. Tejas.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So it's read into the record. This item really deals specifically with any policy or process changes that the RMA has been looking at. And this is a process that we've been involved in for some time, and this relates back to the fraudulent activity that relates back to the streetcar project back in 2016. As you may recall, the board passed a motion in December of 2016 which directed the RMA staff to do a couple of things, and one of those is to investigate changes in RMA policies and procedures to assure the protection of the RMA asset. So I had not been back to you all with an update on that, so I thought this would be an appropriate time to do so. We've done several things along and in concert with the City of El Paso in this regard. I'd mentioned that the chief financial officer of the City of El Paso, who was my point person, is no longer with the city, but I'm looking for somebody from the city to help continue these process improvements. However, before he left, we actually did make several improvements that I think are going to be very beneficial for our relationship. I just want to highlight 3 of them really, which I think are most important. I had several meetings with the CFO before he left to identify internal control processes and policies that the city implements on behalf of the City of El Paso, looking for ways to strengthen those internal controls. And one of them, which I think is a very strong one, deals with the vendor management system. If you recall, the city, as our fiscal agent, manages all of our vendor relationships. And really what that means is when the RMA hires Brookville, for example, Brookville sends an invoice to the Regional Mobility Authority. However, Brookville is a vendor within the City of El Paso's vendor system. So that means that the check goes from technically the Regional Mobility Authority. However, in truth, the check is cut by the City of El Paso to a vendor within the city's vendor management system. Prior to these recent changes, the vendor management system was a little bit was managed very differently, I guess is the way I should say that. In essence, what we've done now is that the Regional Mobility Authority has no input or involvement in relation to the vendor management system any longer. And frankly, we didn't have very much in the very beginning anyhow. What we would do is when we entered into an agreement with Brookville, again, for example, we would send Brookville to the vendor management system, which is a division of purchasing within the City of El Paso. They would fill out forms, give all of their banking information and that sort of thing to the city, and they would be entered into the system. There was loose contact between the RMA and those vendors with changes to contractor names, routing information, and that sort of thing. All of that has been removed now. So if there's a change in the name of a vendor, in any banking information, or anything related to their vendor management file with the City of El Paso, that vendor has to deal directly with vendor management. So there's no input from the RMA, and I think that's a very positive step forward. In addition to that, and more importantly, I think in my mind, vendor management has significantly increased their internal controls so that, for example, if banking information is being changed, the vendor management group contacts the individuals that were originally on the files that were submitted to vendor management to create the file, and contacts them directly. They will not deal with an individual that comes to vendor management that is not within that approved list. So that's one example of several of the important internal control issues that the city has resolved. So that's a big one. I'm really excited about that one. I think that's important. A second one, which is also very important, and we've been working on this one for actually several years, is that the City of El Paso for many years, as our fiscal agent, has retained all of the Regional Mobility Authority funds within their concentration account. That's an issue for several reasons, but really importantly, and before the CFO left, one of his major directives down to the comptroller was to pick up those funds and move them into RMA-specific accounts. Now, while the City of El Paso remains as our fiscal agent, all of these bank accounts are technically City of El Paso bank accounts. We are no longer, our funds are no longer merged into the general concentration account of the City of El Paso. So that's important for us because we're now beginning to receive, and this happened very recently, actually, at the beginning of the fiscal year in September 1, the shift was made official. But now we will begin receiving statements from Wells Fargo with the RMA's name on our own individual accounts, and it's no longer part of the concentration account. So that's a big, big step forward that I'm also very excited about. Then the third point that I wanted to note that I think is also a very big one is it relates to the financial management, the management of the financial activities of the Regional Mobility Authority. This board had directed me some time ago to begin looking for an employee, a second employee of the Regional Mobility Authority, and a job description has been developed. In fact, actually, a job description was originally developed. I worked with legal on that, spoke with with our outside counsel. I spoke with some other regional mobility authorities, best practices and that sort of thing, and actually retooled the job description entirely. So now we have a new job description, and that one I'll actually share with the board likely later today. I'm intending to run it through legal one final pass, and then I intend to have that out on the street within the next couple of weeks. The point of this hire would be to bring in an individual with financial background who does really two things for this agency. The main one is to manage all of the financial activities. So that's all of the individual transactions on a day-to-day basis, to do reconciliations with the city, to manage the annual audits that we're involved in, and to manage and oversee the bond issuances that we have out, the vehicle registration fee, the interloop, and the other debt that we have under the State Infrastructure Bank. So financial management will be the primary role of this individual. However, another very important role for this individual is to serve as the backup to the executive director. So in the event that I am out of the office or something happens to me, this individual will be cross-trained in everything that I do, so that there won't be a step missed. So that's what you will see, and I'll share that draft with you all again later today, hopefully, with a draft of the job description. As I mentioned, I'm going to route it through legal one last time, and then hopefully have it out on the street as soon as next week. So those were the three points that I really wanted to highlight in terms of the steps that we've taken to improve our financial or our policies and procedures related to the RMA assets. So subject to your questions, that's all I have for you.
Mr. Tess, just for clarification on the separate bank account, could you tell us who will be signing on that account? Who has signature authority on it?
The city of El Paso still retains
so
that because
still would be okay. Just
that's
want to
correct.
make sure that that's clear.
Yes, ma'am.
And that they would continue doing the reconciliation. We would just have that information available to us.
That's right. Yes, ma'am. And what makes what is particularly beneficial to us is that it now comes in separate statements by the funds that we've created. So we will actually have 5 separate accounts. So those accounts tie, one of them is to the streetcar, one of them is for bike share, one of them is for tolling activities, one of them is for our general account, and I'm missing the 5th one. Oh, the State Infrastructure Bank loans would be the 5th one. So, and to your prior point, the city of El Paso remains as our fiscal agent and remains with all those duties as originally agreed to. The only distinction is that now we have these separate accounts that we're much more easily able to track.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Madam
Mr.
Chair, I have
Niemer?
several questions. And the first does involve the management of funds for which we're the custodian. And a couple of years ago, I know that we had some bond money that we had in a non-interest bearing account for a period of over a year. And it was county money. And so there was an opportunity cost there. And in going back to see how we could have known as a board, there was no way. The city was managing it. And even in the audit, I went back to the audit and I couldn't see where we could have gleaned that we weren't making any money. And at that time, I recall asking you if we could have a quarterly statement at this board meeting, just showing the funds under management, where they are, what's happening to them. And I would ask that we do have this update quarterly, because the board's responsible. We need to be informed, and we might have seen this a year ago.
Yes, sir. So
and
a couple.
caught that.
Absolutely. A couple of points, though. So the city does not manage any of the vehicle registration fee bond proceeds. So that's really important. The city had no involvement in any of that. Where that fell was with the trustee. right?
Okay,
So that's
right.
an important distinction.
But how could we have known the trustee was failing us?
Correct. So, and we've talked about this a couple of different times, in depth with the county. The way that we are proposing to resolve that issue and to deal with it, is that the county has asked for a proposal from us to use our outside CPA firm to do monthly reconciliations of those accounts. Now, actually, the true fix is that we put language into our bond documents that requires them to be an interest-bearing account. So that won't ever happen again. However, the follow-up and the confirmation of those activities, that was something that we had put together with the county. They had asked for a laundry list of items to be checked on a monthly basis. We sent that to our outside CPA for a cost, and we've sent that back to the county, and we haven't heard back yet on whether or not they're willing to and interested in pursuing it any further. However, the individual that I'm seeking as the second employee would be tasked with all of this to ensure compliance with all of the bond documents, the indenture requirements, and the like. So we're looking at it in two ways. The county wants specific reviews above and beyond, and we've costed that out and asked them if they're interested in doing that. But then, in addition, this second individual would be tasked with managing these issuances as well.
But any funds for which this board, for which the CRRMA is custodian, and so we would still be the custodian for these county VRF bond revenue or funds, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I think that this board ought to have a report on that on a periodic basis.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't address that third point. You're absolutely right, and we've been asking that. So there's two things. There's the issuances for which we use trustees, and then there's the general fund, everything that is routed through the city of El Paso. We've been asking the city for some time to generate those reports for us, and now I think with the shift over into these separate accounts that we now have, that reporting will be much more easy to generate. Whereas in the concentration account, frankly, they said they couldn't develop those reports for us. So for years, we had been pushing for ways to figure out how to do that. So several years back, one of the main reasons I asked for our funds to be moved into separate accounts was for the reporting function. So I think this step forward was huge because, among other things, it's going to give us access to monthly and, more importantly, for the board quarterly reporting. So we're on that. We're heading in that direction. I think also this individual would be tasked with doing that as well.
So
for the
this
board.
board would get a quarterly report.
That is what we're after. Yes, sir. I've been after that for, unfortunately, longer than I'd like to admit.
All right. And Madam Chair, if you'll indulge me
No,
with
go ahead, Mr. Weaver.
another.
Absolutely.
And this also has to do with the management of funds. It's a point that came up in conjunction with item 3 with Mr. Braden. We were visiting about the fact that we have $83 million out in a Series 2008 redemption at a 5% coupon, and I'm not sure whether it's coupon or not makes a difference. I nodded my head when he said, "Oh, it's coupon," but thinking back, I'm not sure I understood the difference. But there's an opportunity to refund. This seems like a very expensive bond. Am I incorrect?
Well, so if he's here, so I'll ask him to support me.
Okay.
This is the way that I've always understood this deal, because on occasion, he mentioned this as well, we do get visits from underwriters periodically, and they will propose refundings, they will propose different ways of managing these funds. Every one of those that I get, we send off to the financial advisor for an evaluation to determine whether the refunding approach saves proceeds or I'm using the wrong term, whether it's more economically feasible and beneficial, I should say beneficial to the RMA to go through the refunding approach or to continue on the process that we've developed, which is periodic redemptions. Mm-hmm. Every time, because of the structure of this particular deal, every time the result has always been the redemption approach that we are using and have used since day one is more economically beneficial to the Regional Mobility Authority. Now I'd ask Mr. Braden if he could kind of expand on that, but that has been the response. And as recently as this refunding, in fact, I sent it to them again and said, I understand this is still our preferred approach. Can you confirm that? And the answer was absolutely yes. Absolutely yes.
Did we at some point recently had them look at that? Did we ask them to do that analysis for us?
We do that We've done that at least twice before, if I remember correctly, twice before the board, and then just on my own, we've done that more than that, more times than that, for sure.
So Raymond's recollection is correct, and the key for this contract is you want to pay off that debt as soon as possible in order for you to have money left over at the end of the contract that the developer has a deferred fee, but then the RMA would get money after that. And it's an economic analysis, so the difference between coupon and TIC, of course, is when they originally sold the bonds, you receive premium as part of the proceeds. So people who buy the bonds want higher coupons to sell, trade in the market, but the actual price you paid in terms of the interest component was less than the 5%, whatever it was historically. But you're right. Right now, you have a 5% bond, and if you could sell cheaper bonds for the same period of time, you could refund it at a savings. But what the FA does is a cost analysis, because it's not. Of course, there is a cost associated with issuing refunding bonds.
Right.
And so they do a cost analysis to indicate whether it's cheaper to do a refunding bond or to continue having this pay down method in terms of what would give the RMA more money at the end of this contract. And so far, the pay down method has worked the way it was supposed to work, where it was the most cost effective way of doing this. Now, again, your FA can now that we've paid off all those early call bonds, the FA can take a look at what it would be now. The thing you're going to run against now is it's relatively short period left, and so it's a cost analysis.
So we couldn't sell an early call bond. So we'd be locked in if we refunded?
Right. If we had refunded along the way, we would have lost that ability to early call, and we would have had a 10-year call on what was left, and so it'd been more costly. And rest assured, the FA, neither the FA nor bond counsel gets, the way they get paid or we get paid is if you do a transaction. So it is in their self-interest, besides being fiduciary to you, to do the deal if it made sense. So they were looking at those deals, and several of them came in. And if it had made economic sense for you to do it, I'm sure they would have recommended that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So, Mr. Tejas, you can visit with our FA, Mr.
Certainly.
Let's see,
And in
can we
fact,
just
Mr.
talk to
Nemur
him
or
about
the entire board, if you're interested, we could have them come down at a later meeting and walk us through either this bond project specifically or anything that you're interested in. So just let me know if you're interested. I can put you on a
that's a good
phone with them
idea.
as well if you're
Feel
interested. So
comfortable with it? Yeah, I think
anytime,
that's
that's
something.
available to the entire board, of course, at any time.
Okay.
So there's no action on this particular item. In fact, actually, I don't have anything else for you.
Okay.
I have a
Mr. Wardy?
comment. Mr. Tejas, I don't want to create additional work for you, but in light of what happened and with what you have discussed today and the things that you have illustrated to us, which are very positive, I think it prudent for the authority for us to memorialize what you have stated today for the record, and then we can vote to add it to our minutes so that we have something actually in writing going forward. None of us, you plan to, but the rest of us are probably not long-term here.
Certainly.
So I think we should have a document illustrating the changes and the reinforcements to our fiscal policy to ensure, so we have more dependence on the system, so on the changes. So I think those should be in writing and added to the minutes. We should take action to add them to our fiscal policy.
Is there
our
any
documents.
value to have it run through the finance committee and have them review that and then?
Sure, I think probably, Madam Chair,
maybe
that's
to
a
do
great
that,
idea.
Have the finance
Okay.
committee meet and review them and then, and bring it to the board.
Just the changes, the things that you have done to reinforce the process changes for protection. And
Okay.
I don't think it needs to be a long document, but you've been very informative today on the actions you've taken. I think it's great, but I think we need them in writing so that we can add them to the record of our minutes. And we know, for everybody's sake, that, hey, this is now policy for the RMA, and I think you've done good on this.
Very well. Absolutely. I can do that.
Okay, thank you. Well, there be no further business in front of the RMA. I'd call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
It's been moved in second. All in favor?
aye.
Okay, we are now officially adjourned on November 8th at 11:26 a.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rigor mortis is
Yeah, I
setting
know,
in.
I'm gonna go